Hilchos Matnos Aniyim Perek Chamishi, the laws of gifts to the poor, chapter 5. Yesterday we learned about leket, another gift to the poor where you have to give fallen stalks that come during the harvest to the poor people. Today we're moving on to what's called shikha. Shikha is the gift to the poor of forgotten stalks. If while you're harvesting or while you're bundling sheaves you forget certain stalks, they have to be left to the poor, and the parameters and the specifics of this law is discussed in today's chapter. So the Rambam begins by giving a general rule that every person involved in the harvest has to forget the bundle in order for it to be considered forgotten. Halacha Aleph, if there was a bundle that was forgotten by the workers who were harvesting the field, but the owner of the field was aware of it and didn't forget it. Or the owner of the field forgot it, but not the workers. Even if both of them forgot it, but there were others passerby who weren't even involved in the field, but they saw it when the owner and the employees forgot it. It's not considered forgotten until everybody involved forgets it. On the other hand, once it's forgotten, even if it's a bundle that's hidden under a pile of things, if it's forgotten, it's forgotten because everybody's mind is off of it. Halacha beis, a special unique law. If the owner of the field was in the city, he wasn't even near his field. And he said, I know for sure that my workers forgot a bundle in a specific place in the field. And then, literally this word means they forgot it, but the Kesef Mishneh explains that to mean the owner forgot it. After the owner made the declaration that he knew that his workers forgot it, then he forgot about the bundle. At this point, the bundle is considered forgotten. Even though at the original point, he made a declaration saying that it's not forgotten. But if this happened in the field, he was by the field, and he made the announcement that I know my workers are going to forget this bundle, and then he forgot the bundle, eina shikha. It's actually not forgotten. There's a difference between the field and the city in this regard. Because when in the field, when something is forgotten from the outset, that's when it's forgotten. But if you were aware of it before, it's not forgotten. Aval ba'ir, but when you're in the city, afilu zachuru l'vasayf shachuach, even if at one point you had remembered about it, but later on you forgot about it, harezu shikcha, it's considered forgotten, shenemar, because the verse which describes the mitzvah says, v'shachachta oimer basada. You forget the bundle in the city. That means the laws apply especially, in the field. It means the laws apply especially in the field. V'lei ba'ir, not in the city. In the city, even if you forget it later, it's still considered forgotten. Halacha Gimel, even though we said in two halachas ago that if a bundle is hidden under something and you forget it, it's considered forgotten, that's only if you were aware of it and there was no external factor that caused you to forget about it. But if something else happened that caused you to forget about it, for example, amduhu Aniyim b'fanav, if the poor people who were waiting to collect their gifts blocked your way, they didn't let you see the forgotten stock, or they covered it with straw, and the owner remembers that there's straw there. He doesn't know why it's there. He doesn't know there's a bundle under it, but he remembers the straw. Or he grabbed a certain bundle with the plan to take it to the city to sell. He left it in the field and he forgot it. In all these cases, the forgotten stock is not forgotten because there was another factor outside of the basic forgetfulness, and that interferes with the shikha applying. But if you simply took it from place to place within a field, even though you left it in a distinct place, near a gate, or near a stack of grain, or cattle, or special utensils, and then you forgot it, it's considered forgotten, because it's still in the field, and you didn't put it in a specific, you didn't take it with the plan to take it to the city. You took a bundle with the plan to take it to the city, in which case it cannot become forgotten, as we just said. But instead of putting it down in the field, you put it on top of another bundle. And you forgot both bundles. If you remembered the upper bundle, not because you saw it again, just in your mind, you remembered that you planned to take it to the city and that you had forgotten about it. Now you remembered it. Not only is that upper bundle not forgotten, even the lower bundle which it's covering is not forgotten, like the law before, that if something else was covering the bundle, it's not forgotten. But if not, in other words, you hadn't remembered the upper bundle until you saw it again, then the bottom one is considered shikha. Like in the first halacha, where it's tumun, where it's hidden, then it's forgotten. In the first case, when you remember the upper bundle, so it's like an external factor covering the bottom bundle. But if you had forgotten about the upper bundle, so the upper bundle is not going to be forgotten because you had planned to take it already to the city. But the bottom one is considered hidden and it is considered forgotten. Halacha hey, afu amarav beruach chazaka l'seich zdei chaverei. We have the wind. It's my picture from yesterday with the wind. The wind blew away very strongly some of his sheaves into his friend's field. V'shachach sham omer. And over there he forgot the bundle. He forgot the bundle in his friend's field. Einoi shikcha. That's not considered forgotten. Shenemar, because it says kitzircha v'sadecha. This is the verse here. It says when you're harvesting your harvest in your field and you forget a bundle, then you don't go back. That means it has to be in your field, not your friend's field. But if the same wind simply spread the sheaves out in your own field and then you forgot, it's too bad. Even though the wind caused this spreading, bottom line is you forgot it in your field. So it's considered forgotten, you have to give it to the poor. A person is picking up his bundles. He picks up bundle number 1, number 2, number 3, and he forgets number 4. So then it depends how many other sheaves there were after number 4. Im hayasham shishi, if there were at least 2 more, so there's a 5th and a 6th, ein haravi shikcha ad sheyital hachamishi. We don't declare the 4th bundle to be forgotten till you actively pick up the 5th bundle. Why? Kesef Mishneh explains, because you could say the person knows that there's 6 bundles, so he's going in 2 groups, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once he takes number 5, now he's revealed that he's forgotten number 4, so he's out. But if there's only 5 sheaves to begin with, and he forgets the 4th one, he doesn't have to actually pick up the 5th sheaf. The moment he pauses long enough to have been able to pick up the 5th sheaf, the 4th one is already considered forgotten, because there's no other way to divide it into groups. It's not like there's 3 and 3. There's only 3 and 2. A field whose bundles are mixed. Now, I'm going to show you this picture. We're going to go back to this soon, but this is just to bring out the point. The way they used to do it was, they used to harvest all the rows of grain and leave the bundles in place. Okay? And then they used to bring all the bundles to the end of the rows, and they would neatly pile them up at the end of the rows. Then you would collect them all, and then you would go back to the granary or wherever you would thresh the grain. Okay? The point is, in this halacha, the sheaves weren't organized neatly at the ends of rows. They were all mixed up. You harvested your whole field, you bundled all the grain, but you didn't put it nicely down, you just made it all one big mishmash. And you forgot one of them. So now, we're not going to consider it forgotten unless you take everything that's around it. Later we're going to see that when it comes, if it's all neatly in rows, then the moment you pass one of the bundles, it's considered forgotten. But over here, because anyway all the bundles were all mixed up, so until you actively prove that you forgot this bundle by taking everything around it, we're not going to consider it forgotten. Halacha ches, haluf. Luf, we had before in the laws of Kilayim, it's one of these 2 plants, according to the major commentators. Either what's called a taro, T-A-R-O, this plant, or alum or arum palestinium, something like that. It's kind of a growing berry. Bottom line is, these plants grow in the ground. They don't grow out of the ground like stalks. The vegetable grows in the ground. Haluf v'hashum b'havitalim v'chayetze b'hem. So luf, which is this vegetable, or garlic or onions, or anything like it, afal pi shehin tmunin ba'aretz, even though their fruit, their produce, is to begin with hidden in the ground, yesh lahen shikha. The laws of shikha apply to them. If you pass by one of the onions and you forget to pick it, it's forgotten, left for the poor. Hakoitzer balayla v'shachach kama. If you chose to harvest your field at night, and you forgot to harvest one grain, or you were bundling your grain at night, and you forgot a bundle, or a blind person who was doing this harvesting or collecting, and he forgot a bundle, yesh lahen shikha. In all these cases, the laws of shikha apply. Even though we said in the previous halacha that if an external factor causes you to forget, it's not considered forgotten. But over here, you can't blame the nighttime, or you can't blame your lack of sight. Why? Because you chose to harvest during the night. Nobody asked you. Do it by day. You chose to do it blindly. Why don't you ask your friend who sees? So you can't blame the external factor and therefore whatever you forget is forgotten. But if the blind person, or the person who was harvesting at night, wasn't trying to harvest everything, he was just trying to get the thicker sheaves, then indeed he can blame the nighttime or the fact that he can't see for whatever else he forgets, and whatever else he forgets is not going to be considered shikha. He can go back and get it later. Anybody who says, I'm harvesting my field now, and I'm making a condition that whatever I'm going to forget, I'm going to be able to take back. Yesh le shikha. It doesn't matter. Even if you forget, you still can't take it. We have a rule. The person who makes a condition against what it says in the Torah, his condition is invalid. Halacha tes. You harvested grain before it was ripe in order to feed it to an animal. So in other words, you didn't harvest it with the intent for human consumption. Or you harvested it into small bundles. You didn't make it into amorim. Amorim are like the bigger sheaves, multiple stalks. Or garlic or onions, which you pick them again also into small bundles, just to sell in the market. And you never made them into thicker, bigger sheaves, big enough to make a proper grain pile. Ein lahem shikha. Shikha doesn't apply to them. If you forget stuff, it's okay. You go back and get it. Halacha yud. Hakoitzer shehischil likzer meireish hashura. You have an individual harvester who began to cut at the beginning of the row. So here we're going to return to this picture here, okay? So here's the guy, but we're going to imagine he's in this box, all right? He's out here, and he's going down the row to harvest the grain. V'shachach lefanav ula acharav. And then he forgets things in front of him and behind him. So, as in this case, he went down this row, and instead of finishing the row, he turned right here and went to the next row. This is the case where he forgot behind him and he forgot in front of him. Because when he was walking, this one was in front of him, this one was behind him. So he goes and he forgets what's in front of him and behind him. Says the Rambam, Shal acharav shikha v'shal lefanav eine shikha. The one that's behind him is indeed forgotten, has to be left for the poor. One that's in front of him is not considered forgotten. Shenemar, because the verse says, when it describes shikha, here's what it says, Loi sashuv lekachtai. Don't go back and get it. So just say, if you forgot it, don't go get it. Why don't go back and get it? That implies, it's only considered forgotten if you walk so far past it that you left it behind you and you have to go back. Zehaklal, this is the rule, kol shehu beval tashuv shikha. Any stock which is under the prohibition of going back to get it, that's considered forgotten. Kol she'ene beval tashuv, if the prohibition of don't go back doesn't apply, ene shikha, shikha doesn't apply either. Now, the commentaries explain why in this case isn't it called going back? Once you turned your back and you went to the next row, you seemingly did turn your back on this one. So the answer is, and it's going to come up again in the next halacha also, as long as this stock can be counted among this row, this way, so we can assume he's going to come back to get it. In other words, even if he goes down here, down here, down here, down here, down here, and he comes back here, boom, he'll get this row, he'll get this forgotten stock. But once you forget the stock behind you, you're not coming back to get that. That's why what's behind you is shikha, what's in front of you is not. Halacha Yud Aleph, Shnayim shehischilu likzer me'emtza hashura. Let's say it wasn't one person, I'm just going to use the same picture, just bring out the point with two people. Two people were cutting from the beginning of the row. Zeh panav latzafain, v'zeh panav ladarim. This guy went downwards to the north, this guy went this way to the south. V'shakachu lifneim ula'achareim. And each one of them did this scenario where they forgot a stock behind them and in front of them. Shalifneihem shikha. So fascinatingly over here, what's in front of them is actually going to be considered forgotten. Because for everyone, what's in front of him is in back of his friend. So to the back of his friend, so his friend is considered forgotten. However, the sheaf which they forgot it in their backs, at the place where they started, and say they both started in the midpoint, and they were forgotten the stock that's right over here. So it's to the back of both of them, Eine Shikha is actually not considered forgotten. Like the same rationale I told you before, it could be considered mixed with the rows going east to west. They were going north-south, but this stock forgotten over here could be counted among the row of east to west. And they will prove that it's not forgotten. Same thing if this scenario would repeat itself, not in the field, but once all the sheaves were moved to the granary, to the threshing floor. Two people began from the middle of the row, and they left a sheaf in the middle between both of their backs. It's not considered forgotten because it could be considered the middle of the row that runs east to west, which they hadn't yet started, which will prove that the middle bundle is not forgotten. Halacha Yud Beis. A person harvests, and he harvests his grain into bundles. And then like the custom was, he moved these bundles, alternatively called in Hebrew alumos or amarim, those are synonyms. He moves them from this place to another place, from second place to the third place to the granary. And he forgets a bundle or a sheaf when he's moving them from place to place. So the Rambam is going to differentiate between one of the midpoints, which was considered to be a point of completion, or a midpoint, which is considered to be not a point of completion. And the Rambam will define those 2 points in the next halacha. But the point is that the Rambam makes in this halacha is as follows. In pina ha'amarim l'makom shu gemar melacha v'shachacham, if he moved the bundles to a place where their work is completed, and that's where he forgot them, yesh le shikha, so at that point, the law of shikha applies, because just like when it comes to harvesting, when you complete the task, that's where forgetfulness applies. And if you'll then move the bundles from that point where their work has been completed to the granary, the laws of shikha no longer apply, because the laws of shikha only apply when you completed the task. Once you completed the task and you move it to the granary, now it's yours. But if you had only moved the bundles to a point where their work is not completed, and that's where you forgot it, so the laws of shikha don't yet apply because you haven't yet completed the task. And then when you move it from that point where the work is not completed to the granary, at that point shikha will apply because that's the point where their work is completed. You've completed the task, and therefore shikha applies there. Yud Gimel, Ezehu Makim Shogmar Malacha, what is defined as a midpoint where their work is completed? Ze Makim Shadaite Lekabetz Kol HaAmarin Sham, V'ladosh Eisan Sham, Oy Lo Helichon Sham Lamakim Gadeshu HaGarden. It's the point at which you decide that all the bundles are going to stay because you want to thresh them there, or because you want to bring them straight from there to the point of the grain pile, which is the garden. What's the point where the work is not completed? It's the place where they gather all the bundles to make them into even bigger bundles to bring them somewhere else. So that's the point where shikha will not apply until you bring it to the granary. The maximum that can be forgotten are 2 bundles that are separate from each other. 3 are no longer shikha. Like we had yesterday by leket, only 2 stalks are considered the gift. More than 2 is not considered a gift. Here 2. 2 sheaves separate from each other, shikha are considered forgotten. If there's 3, they're not forgotten. Same thing for olives and carobs. 2 piles of olives, 2 piles of carobs. If they're separate, they're forgotten. 3 are not forgotten. 2 rolls of flax, linen, shikha are considered forgotten. But 3 are not forgotten. Truth is also for grapes, for vines, trees, 2 trees that are separate from each other. Shikha can be forgotten. 3 cannot be forgotten. Because it says, in the verse that talks about giving the gift, it says you should leave them for the poor, or for the poor and for the convert. That means a maximum of them, even if they're 2. One to the poor, 1 to the convert, but that's the maximum, no more than 2. Halacha Yud Zayin, Hayu Kol HaAmarim Shel Kav Kav, Ve'echad Shel Arba'a Kavin U'Shchachai. Even if every one of the bundles was a kav in size, the dry measurement, and one of them was 4 times larger, 4 kav, and you would think, it's like distinct, you can't forget about it, but if you forgot it, Harei Zeh Shikha, it's forgotten. Yeser al harba eine shikha. If it's more than 4 times the size of the average bundle, then it's not considered forgotten. Same thing if the ratio increases. If every bundle was 2 kav, and this one bundle was 4 times that, 8 kav, doesn't matter. It can still be forgotten. Once it's more than 8 kav, it cannot be forgotten. If you have a bundle which has in itself 2 sa'ah, it's a pretty big amount, of grain, and you forgot it, eine shikha. A sa'ah is 6 kav, so 2 sa'ah is 12 kav. 12 kav is not shikha, automatically. This is considered a inherently distinct bundle. Shenemar, because it says in the verse, V'shachachta oimer basada. You have to forget a bundle in the field. V'loy gadish. A bundle, not a grain stack. Once you have 2 sa'ah, that's like forgetting a whole grain pile. Afal pisha kulan sasayim. Even if the average bundle in your field was wrapped up to be 2 sa'ah of grain, doesn't matter. Shachach shnei amarim. If you forgot a total of 2 bundles, afal pisha yesh mishnei and sasayim, even though their total amount is 2 sa'ah, hare elu shikha, they are considered forgotten. It has to be 1 bundle to be 2 sa'ah in order to be distinct. It seems to me as well, that these 2 bundles together, even if they equal more than 2 sa'ah, so long as each one individually doesn't have 2 sa'ah, it can be forgotten and considered a gift to the poor. Good test. Not a bundle, standing grain. You haven't even cut it yet. Like in this case, the standing grain itself has 2 sa'ah, and you forgot it. It's not considered forgotten. It's like a bundle. If it doesn't have 2 sa'ah, we try to make it have 2 sa'ah. We treat the thin stalks like they're healthy and long. And the ones that may have been attacked by wind blasts, like they may have been ruined, we look at them as if they're full. And if after this imaginary conversion, that standing grain could produce 2 sa'ah and you forgot it, also it's not considered forgotten. It has a distinct entity. What if you forgot a total of 2 sa'ah, but 1 sa'ah was already picked, it was a bundle, and 1 was not picked? They don't combine. They're both considered forgotten. Same with garlic, onions, fruit. If part of them were attached to the ground, part of them were detached from the ground, and you forgot them both, and together they have 2 sa'ah total, they don't combine, they're both considered forgotten. If you have a bundle that was standing next to grain, the grain that was standing still, you hadn't forgotten. The bundle you forgot, it's not considered forgotten. The standing grain saves the bundle. Because it says, again the verse, Ki siktzar b'shachachta oimer. When you harvest, that's when you can forget the bundle. Oimer shesvivaisav katzir shikha. When you have other cut grain next to the bundle, that's when it's considered forgotten. Aval oimer shesvivaisav kama eina shikha. But if you have a bundle which around it is standing grain, it's not considered forgotten. If you forget standing grain next to standing grain which you didn't forget, even 1 stalk, the unforgotten standing grain saves the forgotten standing grain, and you can go back and take it and harvest it. But if you forgot a bundle or standing grain next to a bundle that's not forgotten, even if it has 2 sa'ah and therefore it can never be forgotten, the bundle cannot save the other bundle. And whatever you forgot goes to the poor. In other words, standing grain can save both standing grain and bundles, but bundles cannot save either. Your friend's standing grain cannot save your bundle. Barley standing grain cannot save a bundle of wheat. The standing grain and the forgotten bundle must be of the same species. We move on now to the laws of shikha as it pertains to trees. If you forget 1 tree amongst your orchard, you're harvesting your orchard, you forget 1 tree. Even if on this 1 tree there are many sa'ah of fruit. Or you forgot 2 trees, believe it or not, they're all considered forgotten. The whole tree must be left to the poor. If you forgot 3 trees, okay, that's not considered forgotten, you can keep it for yourself. When do we say that 1 or 2 trees can be forgotten? If it's a tree whose place is not known or famous. For example, it was standing near the wine press. Here's a wine press. Tree is near the wine press, or a tree is near a breach in a wall. Oy b'maisav, or it wasn't recognizable by its deeds. Let's say it produced many olives. Talmud talks about olives. We'll soon see why all the laws are about olives. But they all apply to this to all trees in general. Oy b'shmai, or it didn't have a famous name. It had a well-known name. The olive which flows among the olives. It pours out much oil. Or it's poorer. It produces a lot of oil. Or the opposite. It's bashful. It's shy. It doesn't produce so much oil. In other words, if a tree has no unique factors, not a unique name, not a unique place, not a unique production, that's when you can forget an entire tree and it'll be considered shikha. But if it had any of these three qualities, you cannot forget this tree because it's inherently famous. It's inherently distinct. Because it says, the same verse again, you forget a bundle in the field. It's a bundle which you're going to always forget and you'll never remember unless you see it again. That excludes this special type of tree. If you have a tree near a breach, you're not going to forget this tree. You're going to remember it again even if you don't see it again, because it's inherently known and famous. If the tree was well known in the person's own knowledge, it's not famous for everybody, but in the farmer's mind, he knows that this tree he never forgets about. It's his special tree. It has the same law as a public, well-known tree, and you can never forget it. If the tree was near a palm tree, the palm tree gives it a distinction. If there were two olive trees that were super drippy, in other words, they produce a lot of oil, each neighboring tree helps the other be distinct. If your entire field was of these major production olive trees, then it's like a regular field, and if you forget one or two, you have the law of shikha, and it's forgotten. When do we say this? If you hadn't yet begun to harvest that famous tree. But if in the tree you began harvesting the tree and you forgot some of the tree, it's forgotten, even if it's a famous tree. Because a famous tree you don't forget amongst other trees, but within the famous tree you can forget parts of it. However, the same law has to be as the bundles. You have to have left over less than 2 sa'ah. If you left over 2 sa'ah, it's not considered forgotten. Unless you forgot the entire tree, as we explained. If you have a lone olive tree standing in the middle in a clearing, couldn't get a picture of this, but you basically have 3 rows of trees at least. So here's an olive tree in the middle alone, olive trees around it, okay, in 3 sides. Even if the 3 sides are only made up of 2 olive trees each. Point is, it's surrounded by trees and there's one in the middle. If you forget the middle tree, the lone tree, it's not considered forgotten. Because you can blame it on the outer rows. They blocked my view. That's why I forgot about it. Why were these halachas all said about olive trees? In the time of the Mishnah, when these laws were taught, olive trees were very important. Adrian, but specifically this because one of the Roman Caesars, Adrian, had made a decree to cut down all the olive trees in Israel. So whatever ones remained were considered very chashuv. And so all these halachas were said about olive trees. Chavav, Ezeu Shikcha Ba'aris. We've spoken about bundles of grain. We've spoken about trees. What about grapevines? So you remember from the laws of Kilayim, this is an aris, a trellis, where you train the vines over an area so they can grow nicely. So if you're harvesting a trellis, at what point is the grape considered forgotten? Kol she'eina yachal lifshet es yadei velitla. So long as you're far enough away that you can't stretch your hand out now and grab the grape, it's already forgotten. Ubakerem, in a regular vineyard, mishayavra min hagefen or min hagfanim vishkachaysa. The moment you pass the vine and you forget it, it's considered forgotten. Bedolis uvidekel, if there's a vine raised up on a pole, or it's trained up a palm tree, mishayeded hemenu. Once you go down from the pole or down from the palm tree, whatever's up top is considered forgotten. Ushar kol ha'elanis, any other tree, mishayifne v'yeh lichlei, the moment you leave the tree, it's forgotten. When do we say this? Shaloi hischil bay. Do you have that, or you have hischil bay? What do you have? Shaloi hischil bay, yeah. So that's what many texts have. When are these laws said? When you didn't start on that vine. In other words, you were harvesting the vines all around, and then you somehow just skipped this vine completely, then it's considered forgotten. But if you began on the vine and you forgot, it's not considered forgotten until you harvest all around it. It's a bit of a puzzling line because you would think the opposite is true. And the Kesef Mishnah actually brings an opposite girsa. He says that you should read it the opposite. When do we say it's considered forgotten? If you already started to cut the trellis or you started to cut the vine, then you left the vine, that's when it's considered, that's called shikha. But if you didn't begin and then you forgot, it's not considered forgotten until you cut everything around it, because that shows that you've forgotten this tree. Chav Zayin, the last halacha, hamafkir es karma. If somebody declares his vineyard ownerless, v'hishkim baboiker, he wakes up in the morning and he regrets his decision, he wants to get it back. V'zacha bayla atzmai, and he goes and acquires it himself, which you could do. He gets it back. Ubitzare, and then he harvests the field. Chayav beperet uva'oilalois uv'shikcho v'peya. You're still obligated to give all the gifts to the poor. Fallen grapes, immature grapes, we learned yesterday, forgotten grapes, the corner of the grape field. Because I can still call it your field, your vineyard. It's still yours. It was yours, now it's yours. And so the gifts to the poor are all obligated. But if you went and acquired somebody else's field that was ownerless, you don't have to give any gifts to the poor from that vineyard. Either way, you're exempt from giving meiser, from giving tithes. You never have to give from a field which used to be ownerless at one point or another.